She walked into the hospital that morning with a smile and a purpose, to save lives, not to be judged by the color of her skin. But within minutes, whispers turned to stares, and stares turned into something far worse. A man in a white coat, the one sworn to heal, chose to humiliate instead of help. What he didn't know was that the woman he looked down on carried a truth powerful enough to shatter his pride and expose his prejudice. How could one act of cruelty lead to such unexpected justice? For years, Naomi Ellis had dreamed of working at St. Alden's Hospital, a place known for saving lives, not breaking spirits. At just 24, she had already become a nurse patients trusted instantly. Her voice was soft, her movement steady, and her presence had a way of easing fear. Each morning, she arrived before sunrise, the scent of coffee in the air and the sound of her shoes echoing down the polished halls. To Naomi, this was more than work, it was purpose. But not everyone saw her heart. Behind polite greetings and professional smiles, Naomi often felt the chill of judgment. Some people noticed her skin before her skill. Some mistook her patience for submission. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, believing that kindness and perseverance could overcome ignorance. That morning, the hospital pulsed with its usual rhythm. Phones ringing, nurses rushing, doctors barking orders. Naomi adjusted her ID badge, tied her hair neatly, and smiled at the day ahead. She had no reason to expect anything unusual. But fate had other plans. Within hours, a moment of arrogance would test everything she stood for. A man in authority, someone who should have embodied respect, would instead choose cruelty. And in front of everyone, Naomi's grace would be met with humiliation. What he didn't realize was that the nurse he was about to disgrace wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was someone whose truth carried the power to change everything. The day had started like any other. Patients lining the halls, the sound of heart monitors and hurried footsteps echoing through St. Alden's. Naomi Ellis moved swiftly between rooms, checking vitals, offering smiles, and doing what she did best, bringing calm to chaos. But beneath the noise, something subtle began to shift. When Dr. Richard Hale entered the ward, the atmosphere changed. He was new to St. Alden's, young, ambitious, and known for his arrogance wrapped in charm. To some he was brilliant, to others dangerous. Naomi had heard the whispers, but she believed in giving everyone a fair chance. That belief would soon be tested. Their first encounter happened by the nurse's station. Naomi was updating a patient chart when Dr. Hale strode in, barking orders. His tone was sharp, dismissive. "You prepare room 5, he said without even looking at her. Naomi looked up politely. "Of course, doctor," she replied. But when their eyes met, there was a flicker. One that said he didn't see her as a colleague or even an equal, just someone beneath him. Over the next few hours, his attitude worsened. Each time she offered input, he brushed her aside. Each time she completed a task, he found a way to undermine it. Small things, subtle cuts meant to remind her of her place. Naomi kept her composure. She'd faced worse in silence before. But what happened next would cross a line that could never be erased. Late that afternoon, a critical patient was rushed in, an elderly man in cardiac distress. The room filled with urgency. But amid the chaos, Dr. Hale's impatience grew. When Naomi handed him the wrong set of instruments, an honest mistake in a tense moment, his voice exploded across the ward. "Do you even know what you're doing?" he snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. The other nurses froze. Naomi, her cheeks burning, calmly apologized and corrected the tray. But he wasn't finished. He stepped closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is why people like you shouldn't be in positions of responsibility." The words sliced through the air. "People like you." It wasn't just criticism. It was exposure. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Every eye turned toward Naomi. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't speak. Years of restraint and professionalism held her still. Inside, though, something cracked. The same quiet endurance that had carried her through every whispered slight. Every sideways glance now felt heavier than ever. Dr. Hale smirked and turned away as if nothing had happened. The nurses pretended to continue working, but the damage was done. The humiliation was public, raw, and irreversible. Naomi finished her shift in silence, every movement careful, her thoughts spiraling. As she stepped outside the hospital that evening, the cool air hit her face. Her reflection in the glass doors looked calm, but behind her eyes burned a storm of pain and disbelief. Why had he said it? What gave him the right? And yet, somewhere deep within her, a quiet truth began to rise. One that even Dr. Hale could never have imagined. Because Naomi Ellis wasn't just another nurse. The hospital's board director, the man who built St. Alden's with his own hands, was her father. The same man Dr. Hale was scheduled to meet the next morning to discuss his permanent position. The next morning, the hospital conference room buzzed with quiet anticipation. The staff gathered for what was supposed to be a routine meeting, announcing the appointment of St. Alden's new senior physician. Dr. Richard Hale walked in with confidence, His white coat pressed, his arrogance intact. He had no idea that the woman he had publicly humiliated the day before was sitting just a few seats away, calm but unflinching. Naomi Ellis kept her gaze forward, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The director entered moments later, Mr. Ellis. His presence commanded silence. To everyone in the room, he was a respected leader. To Naomi, he was simply her father, the man who had taught her dignity over pride and silence over anger. Their eyes met briefly, and that single look said everything. He knows. Before we begin, the director said, scanning the room, I'd like to address an incident that occurred yesterday. Tension snapped like a wire. Dr. Hale's smile stiffened. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. It has come to my attention, Mr. Ellis continued, that a member of our staff was publicly disrespected and degraded, not for her performance, but for the color of her skin. His tone was calm but sharp, each word slicing through the air. And the person responsible stands in this very room. All eyes turned to Dr. Hale. His face drained of color. Naomi stayed still, her heart racing but her posture steady. And came the moment no one expected. The director placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder. Nurse, you chose to humiliate Dr. Hale, he said quietly. It's my daughter. Silence. And gasps. Dr. Hale's lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. The man who had mocked her worth now stood exposed, his arrogance unraveling in front of every colleague. Naomi didn't speak. He didn't need to. Presence, her composure, her grace in the face of cruelty said everything words could not. As Dr. Hale's world collapsed in a single heartbeat, untruth became undeniable. Sometimes the loudest justice is delivered in silence. Meeting ended in silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The truth had settled heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. Dr. Hale was dismissed from his position that very day, out of vengeance, but out of accountability. Arrogance had cost him the one thing he valued most, respect. For Naomi Ellis, she didn't celebrate his downfall, simply returned to her patience, to her purpose. As her victory wasn't in his punishment, it was in her strength. It faced humiliation, but she walked through it with grace that no prejudice could stain. Days that followed, whispers turned into conversations. The hospital that once hid its quiet biases was now forced to confront them. Colleagues who had stayed silent began to speak up. Policies changed. People listened. Slowly, the same walls that had witnessed her pain began to echo with something different. Awareness. Naomi never sought to be the center of a lesson. She became one nonetheless. Reminder that dignity can be the sharpest weapon against hate. The story wasn't about revenge. About the quiet power of standing tall when the world tries to make you small. The truth is, what happened to Naomi doesn't just live inside hospital walls. It lives in offices, in classrooms, in every space where judgment still comes before understanding. Her story is one of thousands, each carrying the same silent plea. See us for who we are, not what you assume we are. Racism doesn't always shout. It often whispers. Whisper has the power to wound, or to wake us up. Question remains. How many more stories like Naomi's will it take before the world stops needing to be reminded that equality isn't a privilege,